Hi. Hi, Charlene Webb, Kitson-Kalem Health Director, the Northwest Rep for the Health Directors Association. Welcome, everybody. I got a bit of a tickle in my throat, so I'll turn my mute off as I'm clearing my throat often. Welcome. Good afternoon. Today's wellness webinars is hosted by the First Nations Health Directors Association. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory I'm sitting on, and that's the Tsimshian territory. I live and breathe and work in the area. I am a carrier woman from the Fort St. James area. And for those that don't know it, north of Prince George. And thank you again for taking this opportunity to sit with us during this amazing webinar. Sorry. My traditional name is Niskal. I carry that name from my mother. I'm the head of Lachabu of Nakasley Wadokdan. My name is Charlene Webb, the health director for Kitson-Kalem, and I live here in Kitson-Kalem, just on the outskirts of Terrace, BC. I am a member of First Nations Health Directors Association, elected in as of January 2020, and I've been a health director here in Kitson-Kalem since 2013. I've been, prior to this, I was assistant health director for the interior, Central Interior, sorry. Great learning opportunities, amazing connections I've had over the years. And with that said, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Nel. I'm going to make a boo-boo on your last name. And my custom is if I make a mistake, I have to hold the potlatch. So I'm going to leave you at Dr. Nel. Before she takes over, I do encourage you to, if you need to step out, just make sure your mic is on mute, or a little note that you'll be right back, BRB. That will be most helpful for the ladies monitoring the Q&A portion. Thank you. Dr. Nel, okay. It's over to you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Charlene. Dr. Nel, I said I put in the chat, is perfectly fine. And thank you very much for having me spend some time with you this afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen and pray that it works. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect. Great.
Awesome. All right. So today I was asked to come and speak about mental health, wellness, and self-care during wildfire season. And as you can see from my title slide, I put in brackets and everything else that's been going on for the past year and a half, because there's been a lot. I just want to take the opportunity to introduce myself and do my land acknowledgement. So I am Indigenous, not on my ancestral territory, and I respectfully acknowledge the land on which I work, live, and play is the traditional, ancestral, and continually occupied territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. For myself, I guess I can do a little bit of an introduction. Some of you may know me already or have worked with me, probably on parts of the COVID response. So I am originally from Little Grand Rapids First Nation, which is part of the Anishinaabe Nation in Treaty 5 territory, which is northeastern Manitoba. But I grew up most of my life in Thunder Bay, Ontario. I'm a 60 scoop survivor. Spent most of my adult life in southwestern Ontario, including the last 14 years in Toronto. And I'm laughing because we were chatting before this webinar started, and Apparently I pronounce Toronto like a real Toronto person, so leave out the second T. And one of the things that, I think it's important for all of us to do is to situate ourselves where we are at, but where we are from as well. And being a 60 scoop survivor, this hasn't been easy for me, but in the last couple of months, I've actually come into contact with a second cousin. So now I'm able to tell people that my parents were Charlie Green and Marianne Duck, and my paternal grandparents are Charles Green and Mary Jane Keeper. So this afternoon, I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about what we've all been not just working on, but living through over the past couple of years, and especially how challenging it's been over the summer with both the heat wave, the heat dome, and the wildfire situation as well. But there have been many other things going on in the background. And I guess first and foremost, as a way of starting, is to acknowledge all of the hard work of the health directors. So I raise my hands to you for your unwavering commitment to communities and the long hours and the sacrifices that you've made to address not just one, but 2 declared public health emergencies and 3 undeclared public health emergencies. So of course, the first 2 we know quite a bit about, the COVID pandemic, which unfortunately most recently has been on the upswing again in terms of daily new cases. The Delta variant is now the predominant COVID strain in our province, and the need we have to continue to try to have as many eligible people as possible be vaccinated, fully vaccinated with both dose 1 and dose 2. The other declared public health emergency we used to refer to as the opioid crisis, but now we're referring to as the toxic drug crisis or toxic drug poisoning crisis. Partly because of the incredible lethality of the current drug supply that's out on the streets. We actually lost more BC First Nation individuals to toxic drug deaths in 2020 than we did to COVID-19. So this is something that we also have had to keep our eyes on and extend effort into. The other emergency that arose before this summer was the anti-Indigenous racism piece, and that came partly because of the news coverage last summer of the purported drinking game or blood alcohol guessing game that was reported in emergency rooms that was found not to be systemic, but did actually occur in a few places, and the release of the In Plain Sight report with 24 recommendations for action. So I signify that in my slide with the picture in the middle. These photos are done by an incredible artist named Casey Adams in Manitoba. And I put the link there. It's called the Perception Series. And I use these a lot, actually. There's a whole series of them. And if you're interested, you can just put Casey Adams, the Perception Series into Google, and you'll see some of the images. So for example, one of the most common ones is, that Indigenous people or First Nations people are drunken Indians, and pardon my use of that phrase. But it invites the person to look at both pictures side by side, and you'll find that this lady in this example, her name is Tamara First Charger. She's from the Kenai First Nation, a mother, sister, auntie, daughter, strong, fierce, independent woman, powwow dancer, educator, volunteer, and internationally known for her fry bread. So in this series, the artist actually asked in the first picture for the person to pose envisioning how they feel or would react to a racist comment, so being called a drunken Indian. And then in the second picture on the right-hand side, they're asked to just kind of be themselves. But I use these slides quite a bit because it's quite jarring actually when you see the sort of racist comments, the stereotypes, and then the person in reality. And then of course, we're here to talk about what we're all living through with the BC wildfires. Of course, some of us are in much more jeopardy than others in terms of having to be evacuated or being on alert for potential evacuation. We know some First Nations communities have suffered a lot this summer, including the people who work in those communities, including health directors. So again, I want to extend my thanks and gratitude for all the hard work that goes into mounting a response to wildfires. And last but not least is the situation that continues to evolve, not just here in BC, but across the country with the unmarked graves being found or noted at sites of former residential schools across the country, but particularly here in British Columbia. And the announcement, for example, this morning from the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations that they will begin a search at the St. Paul's Residential School, and of course to Kamloops, to Schwetmek, and the other school sites that have been identified so far. So when you look at this slide and you think, oh my gosh, like these are all the things that have been going on. Those are the major things, not to mention all of the other work that takes place in different areas. It's easy to feel how we can all be feeling kind of overwhelmed because we're not just working on these issues, we're living through it in many cases as First Nations people. For example, you know, in my biological family, my birth family, there are attendees of residential schools, former students. Neither of my parents are alive anymore, but I myself, as a 60 scoop survivor, have been feeling some really strong emotions about what's been going on with the unmarked graves. So there's a lot for all of us to contend with. So, two things before I go into the major part of my presentation. Please feel free to ask questions at any time or put them in the chat. I can only see the sort of bar of 4 people, but if I think the chat is active, so I can see some questions in the chat if they come up. And also I'll be taking questions at the end. And additionally, I have just sent by email a PDF copy of my slides. So I have some slides further down in the presentation that have a lot of resources and links to resources. So don't feel that you have to kind of keep track of some of these things that I'm sharing. So as I mentioned, you know, all of these things that we've been contending with can lead to a lot of feelings. And particularly in the way that we've been working over the past 16 months or so, have been very stressful for people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, some underlying information about stress, about anxiety, trauma, depression, and then focus in the second half of my presentation on how we can try to deal with this within ourselves and try to help the people around us and the people with whom we work. So all of those things I mentioned, the COVID pandemic, the wildfire situation, you know, there's a certain amount of unpredictability to these things and uncertainty, and that can create a lot of anxiety for people. So for example, I remember when the pandemic first started, you know, people were asking us, Oh, and I didn't actually say what I did at FNHA. I'm sorry. I'm the acting deputy chief medical officer right now, and I work with Shannon McDonald, who's the acting chief medical officer. Sorry about that. I'm also a psychiatrist by training. So before I came to work for FNHA 3.5 years ago, I worked as a psychiatrist for over 20 years in a variety of settings. I worked on reserve on the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory in Southwestern Ontario for about 8 years. And then I worked in Toronto in a number of different settings, mostly with what we would call at-risk populations. So people who were homeless, people who were HIV positive, people who were vulnerably housed. And I worked for an assertive community treatment team for YWCA Toronto, including 50 Indigenous women-led families. So, and my specialty, if I had to say I had one, is more in the emergency psychiatry realm, crisis psychiatry, rather than seeing people for long-term psychotherapy or therapy. Sorry about that. So going back to the unpredictability, you know, people were asking us at the very beginning, you know, how long is this going to go on? And, you know, of course, that answer is really difficult to say. Even the last couple of months, with more people becoming vaccinated, some of the public health measures being lifted, the mandatory mask, for example, public health order was lifted. And then, of course, now we're heading into increased number daily new cases. So there's always this kind of roller coaster uncertainty. And the same for wildfires, right? We don't know exactly, you know, at whatever time where another series of wildfires will start up, which regions or sub-regions will be affected. Things could be under control for a period of time, and then we could have a thunderstorm with more lightning strikes or more man-made wildfires. All of these, you know, the unpredictability and the loss of control is what triggers for many people feelings of stress and anxiety, because we, you know, by nature, we like to know that things are predictable and heading in a certain direction. Similarly with the unmarked graves, you know, this is something that has come to attention more recently, although if you go all the way back to the final reports of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's a whole volume number 4, almost 300 pages dedicated to the issue of unmarked graves and burials at residential school sites. But it seems to have come to attention now. And, you know, we don't necessarily know, again, how long it's going to go on for. You know, it's going to go on for a while, because different schools located near certain communities are different states of readiness in terms of, you know, how they're going to start looking or what they're going to undertake. So all of this uncertainty can cause a lot of stress. There is also, you know, the history, the shared history and individual history of past traumas, including past pandemics, past historical experiences, and past experiences of wildfires. So for many people, you know, 2017 was a pretty bad year for wildfires. 2018 was a pretty bad year for wildfires. We had a bit of a reprieve last summer. But this summer has been, you know, another a summer where the wildfire situation has really been devastating. And I can't remember the reports today. I usually try to check the BC Wildfire app every morning, but I think we have something like over 200 fires that are out of control, and 60 something wildfires that are of particular note. So there's, you know, the situation is changing, and it's been quite large. Again, many of these sort of public health emergencies that we've been dealing with have a component of racism to them that makes it additionally hard to deal with. So for example, the COVID pandemic, many of you probably remember some of the stories in the media about, for example, the community of Snuneymuxw The surrounding community was refusing to let community members into grocery stores or restaurants because of the fear of contagion that was based in anti-Indigenous racism. I've heard stories on leadership calls of some of the evacuees complaining about the treatment they've received at evacuation centers or the accommodations that they've been put in. So, you know, that's an extra layer of distress. And then, of course, we head into all these other factors like COVID fatigue, the fourth wave coming on with the variants, the Delta variant, and other variants. I've already mentioned the vaccine, trying to build confidence. To a certain extent, we're still struggling, I think, with isolation and loss of social interaction. We're getting that back gradually, some of us quicker than others. And I think the important thing here is to, you know, for people to feel that they can go at their own pace. My executive assistant, Pamela, is, you know, she's a real social butterfly. So she's like embraced this, you know, sort of coming out of, you know, not quarantine, but coming out of the pandemic, or at least, you know, once she was fully vaccinated, she's socializing all over the place. And that's great for her. I've been a little bit, even though I'm outgoing in a way, I have to be outgoing as part of my job. I'm actually pretty introverted, so I think I've seen a couple of people since, but yeah, I'm taking my time and I'm busy. So of course I use that excuse too. Like I don't have a lot of time to socialize, but I should make more of an effort. And I'll talk about that as part of stress relief. Mentioned already the evacuations, the alerts, the orders, that's stress provoking for people. And grieving, I think that's the other thing to keep in mind, right? We've had losses over the past couple of years, losses related to the pandemic, losses related to the toxic drug poisoning crisis, other types of losses due to wildfires. So not just losses of people, but places and things. Our connection to the land, our traditional territory, access to traditional foods and medicines, all of these things get affected, for example, by wildfires. And we're living under short and both long-term instability. So I guess part of the question we have to ask ourselves is sort of, you know, I don't know if anybody remembers what normal is, what was normal like, and into the future. And by that question, I'm also asking about the way that we work. I don't know about you, but you know, the last 16 months, and I'll use a lot of examples from my own life because I'm in this a similar boat, is, you know, I've been working mainly from home, but that partly means that I have more time in some ways available to be available at work, right? Like I get up early in the morning and I can roll out of bed and in my pajamas get on Zoom and stay there all day long. So I don't have that commuting time anymore, or that office time where you take a little bit of a break, get something to eat, talk to other people. So the way in which we work has kind of been normalized. And part of my own worry is, you know, how do we go back to working in the way that we used to before? Because it's pretty difficult. You hear people say all the time, you know, the way that we're working isn't sustainable, but you know, we just keep working anyway. At least that's what I see right now. There doesn't seem to be an end to the way that we're working and the way we have worked since the pandemic. And of course, even more so during wildfire season. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about stress. And I like to use a lot of pictures in my presentation. So bear with me because some of them seem like they're out in left field, but they're not, kind of. So stress, first of all, is a normal human reaction to things. We have to, in some cases, mount a stress response in order to contend with a situation that we find ourselves in. But when we experience changes or challenges, which are called stressors, Our body produces both physical and mental, both emotional and intellectual responses. And these responses help us adjust to these new situations. So they can be positive, keeping us alert, motivated, and ready to avoid danger. And so there's a typical peak to the stress response that can actually be helpful. So for example, the picture on the top left, I put just because I'm a fan of the Olympics. I don't know if other people are, but I watched a little bit of the Olympics over the past couple of weeks. And I don't know if anyone else caught the Canadian women's gold medal soccer game. But when it went to a shootout and sudden death shootout, I was stressed, but I can't imagine the stress level of those athletes that had to take those penalty kicks, and they missed a few. So that's like their stress response was kind of necessary for them to get through that shootout. And, so happy that they actually managed to win it, because that was incredible. But stress becomes a problem when the stressors, the things that cause us stress, the challenges, changes, continue without relief or periods of relaxation. And I would argue that the last 16, 17 months pretty much has been one of unremitting challenge for all of us who are living through this and working on these various crises. When we have chronic or long-term stress, continued activation of that stress response causes wear and tear on the body, on the mind, on the spirit. And so you'll see the graph on the bottom left of your screen, or these are just examples of sort of a positive stress response, which would be the shootout, the penalty shootout above. Stress is high for a little period, and then it comes down to manageable levels. More sustained is in the middle. It's high, but overall things are moving in a better direction. It's limited in duration. I am suggesting that what we're living through right now is kind of what they call a toxic stress situation, where our stress is high, it's prolonged. So we need to do something about that in order so that, we don't break down. And the other thing about me is, I'll tell you two things about myself. One is I love to use humor because that's a major coping mechanism. But the other one is I can be bluntly honest, and that might be more of an Ontario or Toronto characteristic, but I speak kind of from the heart, or I speak honestly. So I think, we can all think of people that we know who have gone off on stress leave during this time, who have developed pretty significant medical conditions because of the way we have been living and working over the past 16 months. And, I don't really think that's okay. I don't necessarily have the answer to that. But when I see some of, in my experience working in the central office, and I see some of our senior leaders who are really having health problems and needing to go off on leave, then that signals to me that we've been living under stress and we've been working too hard over the last number of months. So most of you are probably really familiar with fight or flight as a stress response, right? So, probably you can think of an example in your daily life where that might happen. I did go on a camping vacation because we had to stay within our region. So I went camping, and the only bear I saw was from our car, thank goodness. But like that would be like a very acute example of a stress response, right? If you're hiking in the woods and you come face to face with a bear, okay, like you're gonna have to do something to deal with that. But what happens is that stress response, as you'll see in the bottom left of that of my screen now is it has a lot of effects on different parts of our body. So our heart rate can be increased or elevated. Our heart has to work a little harder. Our adrenal glands, which sit on top of both of our kidneys, produce something, both adrenaline, which causes the heart rate to go up, also release something called cortisol. And cortisol can interfere with blood glucose control. So if people have type 2 diabetes or even type 1 diabetes, it can cause your blood sugar levels to be very unstable. It can cause high blood pressure, problems with your digestive system, changes in the way your liver converts certain substrates, and can result in different ways of fat storage. So, people joke about, the COVID-19, meaning like the 19 pounds you've gained during COVID because you've been sitting at a desk or at a computer, not getting much exercise, overworking. But it's partly in response to being under that constant level of stress that cortisol is causing fat to be stored kind of in our middle area. So there are real physiological reasons why some of us have come out of the COVID pandemic, or we're hopefully at the last wave, hopefully, looking a little bit different and less healthy than we did at the beginning. So physical symptoms of stress, when it becomes chronic, I've already mentioned, but things like aches and pains, chest pain, a feeling your heart's racing, being exhausted but still having trouble sleeping. I don't know, I describe it sometimes to my partner as I'm too tired to fall asleep. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody or if anybody's experienced that. Headaches, high blood pressure, I've mentioned, muscle tension. So especially, for those of us on computers, your neck, your shoulders, we're all hunched up like this, clenching in your jaw or grinding of teeth, stomach problems, and having a weak immune system. I mean, literally the only thing I've had going for me the last 16 months was all that mask wearing and hand washing. Many of us have not had a cold for 16 months. Like I have not had one cold, and I'm usually good for 1 or 2 a year. So I'm grateful for that. Emotional or mental symptoms are things like anxiety, having panic attacks, irritability, sadness, leading into depression. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. And then sometimes people try to manage their chronic stress with unhealthy behaviors. So making healthy versus unhealthy choices, drinking too much or too often, gambling, overeating, eating disorder, compulsive sex, shopping, internet browsing, smoking, using substances, both cannabis, over-the-counter medications, prescription medications, or illicit substances. Now, burnout, we hear this, and I promise I'm going to get through this and then it's going to get better. Burnout, we hear that a lot. People throw that term around like, oh, I'm really burnt out. But what does it really mean? It refers to a state where chronic stress has gone on so long that you actually reach kind of a different level. So stress is like, we're over engaged in things, we're busy, we're doing things, we're a bit overwhelmed, but we're still kind of doing all this work. And we've been doing this for the last 16 months. It makes us feel tired, and it primarily takes a physical toll. But burnout is the accumulation of that stress over long periods of time. And it starts to be characterized by what we call disengagement, meaning you start withdrawing, you're still working, but you're feeling less a part of a team. You're feeling underappreciated. You start to isolate yourself a bit more. You lose your motivation, and it primarily takes an emotional toll. There's a really good link at the bottom of this slide. I won't take you to it in the presentation because I'm not that technologically advanced, but it is there for you to check out. There's lots of information about burnout. It is a mental health issue, and it leads to people feeling not just physically, but emotionally exhausted, feeling unappreciated, overwhelmed, even though you continue to work hard. Things like having decreased energy, less efficient, low motivation, making errors, fatigue, headache, irritability, etc. I don't know about the rest of you, but one of the things I've noticed for myself is my memory. Like my memory for when things happened or meetings has completely gone out the window. Like I could say if we had a meeting a month ago, I probably would be off by a month if I tried to guess when we met. I'll be like, yeah, we met like last week. And people are like, no, that was actually 4 weeks ago. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I have no recollection of that. That's one symptom I notice in myself. Severe burnout, of course, can lead to things like, it can affect your physical health, lead to depression, use of substances as a way to cope. So failure to recognize that situation can be difficult, can be damaging, and recognizing that change is needed. People need to come to that realization that, as we said, this isn't sustainable, but somehow someone's got, for yourself, have to break that cycle and do things for yourself that are helpful and can get you out of that feeling of burnout. So prevention strategies, we'll talk a little bit more later because there really isn't like a treatment for burnout, but some of the ways to prevent it going forward are things like I can hardly say this word, reprioritizing work and life demands, learning new skills for efficiency. And that one, when I read it, I was like, yeah, right. Like I've got time to learn new things. Like I'm too busy doing other stuff. That one's a bit challenging, and I'll be honest about it. Learning how to take breaks, connecting with others, and engaging in life outside of work. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. Anxiety disorders. So this is when things have reached a point where, you may have a pre-existing anxiety disorder heading into all of this, or you may develop one. And there are many different types of anxiety disorders, including panic disorder. So that's having panic attacks. Social anxiety, where some people actually have a real problem with social interactions, being out in public speaking, for example. Generalized anxiety disorders, when you worry about almost everything all the time. Specific phobia is not so relevant for this purpose. These are things that people are super frightened by, out of proportion to other people. And I'll give you an example from my own life. I have a phobia to spiders. I can't stand them. I can't stand the thought of them. I can't look at pictures of them. I actually, in a clinical, when I was seeing a patient once, a spider came down in between our faces from the ceiling. And I was asking her about her anxiety symptoms. And then this spider literally dangled right in front of my face. And I was batting it away and screaming and getting her to stomp on it. Like, and I'm supposed to be the doctor, right? But she's like, do I have a phobia like that? She goes, no, I don't have that. But so, and then the other thing to be aware of is traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. This is really a big one, I think, for First Nations people. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think oftentimes in psychiatry, we have tried to pigeonhole people into these very precise diagnostic categories. And my experience of working with Indigenous people for many years is we don't easily fit into these diagnostic categories sometimes, but we have high levels of post-traumatic stress, not just some of the experiences of, say, residential school or intergenerational trauma, but contemporary experiences of trauma as well. And sometimes there is a a condition called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, where people show symptoms of PTSD and anxiety and depression and some interpersonal issues. So people's presentations or how they show themselves and the symptoms they have are really complex and challenging. The most important thing to remember about anxiety disorders is they become a disorder when it's associated with impairment in daily functioning in all or most spheres. And by spheres, we mean your family life, your work life, your social life, etc. And they have to be sustained. The symptoms have to be sustained for a period of time. I was just talking about complex post-traumatic stress. And so there's a little bit of a difference between post-traumatic stress, you'll see in the picture on the bottom, post-traumatic stress, which is, started out initially as being diagnosed in veterans of war, but we now know many other different things can cause post-traumatic stress. But complex post-traumatic stress is a very all-encompassing kind of condition where people experience all sorts of symptoms, not just the core symptoms, what we call the core symptoms of PTSD, like re-experiencing the trauma, reliving it in our mind, having avoidance or numbing of avoiding situations, and hyperarousal. So, for example, being, really aware of your circumstances, being startled by loud noises, things like that. But complex post-traumatic stress can also be associated with what's called emotional dysregulation. And that's a really big phrase to say people have, in some cases, extreme emotional responses to things. They may experience suicidal thoughts. They may engage in self-harm behaviors. And by that, it could be anything like not just cutting themselves, but burning themselves, pinching themselves, bruising themselves. Overeating is another example of self-harm. Having interpersonal difficulties, trouble in relationships, all sorts of symptoms. So it's important, this isn't going to be a lecture on sort of how to treat all of these conditions, but that being aware that these conditions may exist both within ourselves, but within the people we work with and the community members that we work with. Symptoms of depression. Again, I group these in what I call the feeling symptoms, the thinking symptoms, and physical symptoms. So feeling symptoms are things like feeling sad, being tearful, people feeling empty, feeling hopeless. People can be irritable. People can be angry, and always not, typically it's not sort of always just sad, a sad feeling. Thinking symptoms are ones that affect sort of the way that we function. So having slowed thinking, having trouble concentrating, having trouble making decisions, things that used to be super easy to make our minds up about, all of a sudden become really difficult. And having challenges remembering things with your memory, having thoughts again of suicide or wanting to harm yourself. And the physical symptoms are things like sleep disturbance. So either sleeping too much or having insomnia, having no appetite and experiencing weight loss, or having an increased appetite, particularly for carbohydrates and comfort foods, and with the associated weight gain, loss of energy. Small tasks take greater effort than usual. And again, the point to make about when it becomes a disorder or a clinical depression is it interferes with one's daily functioning and is present for a sustained period of time. And I'll just quickly talk a little bit about substance use, because that's something that we have to be mindful of. People have different ways of coping. Some are healthy for us, some are not so great for us, but increasing substance use as a coping mechanism to deal with stress. So signs that someone has increased their use can show up as having loss of interest in usual things, Physical signs, frequently being hungover, having a shake in your hands, change in physical appearance, discovering evidence of use, rapid mood swings, someone being more reclusive and private, a change for them, a change in what's considered normal, erratic behaviors, defensiveness, anger, and a change in sleep habits. So this is something to just keep in mind. I'm also very open about my own journey. I've written about it in blogs for FNHA. I'm in recovery myself. I'm an alcoholic, but I have not had a drink for over 6.5 years. And I live a much better, happier, healthier life, having made the decision to not pick up a drink again. And it all started because I experienced a loss, significant loss. I lost my best friend of 37 years and my mother within a 3-month period. I was overworked. I started drinking wine at night to be able to, relax. Then I wanted to be able to go to sleep. And then before I knew it, my drinking was out of control. So I had to do something about it. So if anybody here is listening, gosh, it took me a long time to seek help, because as a doctor, I thought, I should be able to fix myself. I got to hide this, first of all. I don't want anybody to know. I'm supposed to be a role model. All those feelings, and that's a different talk, but it is something that, I never imagined that would ever happen to me, and it did. But I'm so grateful that I found a way out of it, and I'm healthy and relatively happy, a little burnt out, but I would encourage anybody who's struggling to seek help. Now, I use this picture of COVID just because it really exemplifies, I think, the situation the health directors and ourselves finding ourselves in. We are barely holding things above water sometimes. That's what it feels like. We were told at the beginning, of the pandemic, never mind the wildfires. We are running a marathon, not a sprint. So pace yourself. But the pace has been really tough. So we need to try to look after ourselves. And I'm going to switch into talking about that now. So stress management, we talked about stress at the beginning, how if it's prolonged and over a long period of time, it can be harmful. So we have to learn ways and try to do some things to reduce our stress. And I know, one of the first things people think is, oh yeah, like, when am I ever going to find the time to do that? But it really is a decision that we all have to make about, what kinds of things can we do that we can incorporate as habits going forward that can help us reduce our stress and our stress level. The other thing I would remind you of, when you see a picture on the top right, like I have here, the tips for stress management, avoid stress. Well, that's not really possible. Exercise, eat well, have a hobby, meditation and relax, have a vacation. I put these here, and please take all of these with a grain of salt, because what I'm not suggesting is it be like New Year's Eve. I don't know if the rest of you are like me, but up until actually I probably got into recovery, New Year's Eve for me was like, okay, I'm gonna exercise more, and I'm going to eat better, and I'm gonna take time to learn mindfulness, and I'm not gonna swear anymore. I'm gonna be a better person. And all of those resolutions would last maybe like 8 o'clock New Year's Day. Like, if you try to do 10 changes all at once, I don't know, maybe you can do it. I certainly can't do it. I'm suggesting that you try to pick 1 or 2 things and work away at it and try to incorporate it part of your work-life balance, and then try adding on something else. It's too hard to change 5 or 6 things at once. ultimately, if you fail at them, you will feel self-defeated and go, oh, well, that didn't work for me anyway, so why should I bother? And then continue feeling overstressed. So part of it is taking some of these tips and seeing which ones kind of make the most sense to you or feel like they would be easily incorporated into your life. So thinking about things that you've accomplished rather than things that you didn't get done. Gratitude is a big one. And I guess I can speak to this one from a lens of someone who lives in recovery, that every single night, I don't journal. I don't do a gratitude journal, although some people do, and they recommend journaling as a stress management technique. But I do, right before I go to bed, I think about one thing that I'm grateful for that day. Some days, honestly, it's like, I'm grateful that I got through the day. Some days it's more specific. Some days it's work related, like, oh my God, thank God, I just did that presentation in front of Richard Jock and he doesn't hate me. Like, it's like, it's not that complicated. I don't seem to be like, oh, I'm so grateful that, I have this, wonderful life. And sometimes it's really pointed. And at least I've gotten myself into the habit of, I think of one thing during my day that I'm grateful for. And it's something that's become a daily practice. Learning to say no, that's a tough one, right? You have multiple demands on you, people asking you to do this left, right, and center. There probably are a few things along the way that you can say no to, even though it's hard to do. I've got an email sitting in my inbox, someone asking me to do a talk on August 25th. I've already said I'd do a talk on the 24th and the 26th. My first instinct is go, yeah, I could probably squeeze that in. It's the day in between. No, I'm going to reply and say, you know what? I'm already kind of overbooked with presentations, so I'm going to say no to that one. But I get the drive or the want to sort of please people and try to do as much as you can. And I'm going to whip through these slides, so don't feel like you're missing out, because this is be in the PDF that will be emailed to all of you, because some of these slides are hard to see up on the screen. But there are many different resources. For example, if you're having anxiety, there's some tips on the picture on the left, but there's some very real resources on the right that you can check out on the internet. Anxiety is, it depends on the person again. For me, my anxiety is best managed for me by being a little bit more physically active. If I have a lot of things on my plate that are really kind of bugging me, the best way for me to deal with it is to go for a walk, and just that physical activity gets kind of rid of some of that inner agitation, where I can start thinking more clearly about what it is that's causing me anxiety about that particular situation. But again, for some people, if it reaches the point where it's impacting your ability to function in a significant way, and if it's been present for a long period of time, it probably would be worth speaking to whoever provides your primary health care, whether that's a nurse practitioner, your first contact as a nurse, or a physician. Our virtual doctor of the day program, for example, is one way for people to access a physician if you don't have one. This one again is about depression and different ways to treat depression. So for example, the one on the left, depression is actually caused by a number of chemicals in our brain, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. So dopamine is the chemical that gives us that feeling of reward. And so you get sort of some dopamine by completing a task, doing some self-care, and I'll talk about that in a sec. Eating food, although again, that one has to be done in moderation, or celebrating a little win. Oxytocin, which is the love chemical that makes us feel happy. I love the one at the top, which is called playing with a dog. I have a dog, and he, no matter how grumpy I am, no matter how sad I am, he just, runs when I come in the door with that goofy expression and gives me like kisses and licks or whatever. That gives a little burst of oxytocin in my brain and makes me happy. My family's back in Ontario, including my daughter and my 3-year-old grandson, and I have not been able to see them during the pandemic. So I haven't had that rush of being with family members. But in the meantime, my sometimes barky dog, who's being incredibly good during this presentation, he's made appearances before, but not today. And then, of course, being with your family, who you can be with, and if you have a partner. Serotonin is actually the chemical in the brain that antidepressants tried to elevate, or most of them. So things like meditating, running, being out in sunshine. It's been too much of sunshine, I would say, lately. Taking a walk in nature or any other kind of activity. And of course, endorphins are the painkiller. So exercise is a good example of that. And the other thing to note is, I always feel like if I'm going to go out for a walk, probably the first hour leading up to going out for a walk, I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm too tired. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Force myself to go out for a walk. And honestly, by the time I get back, I never regret it. And that's the endorphins in your system. So it's really tough to overcome and pull on your tights or your t-shirt, your running shoes, whatever. But if you can get through that part and get out the door, I guarantee you feel better because you've been out doing it. Gratitude on the top right, we've already talked about. We all have different things that we're grateful for. What works for somebody to think about doesn't work for other people. It's for you to think of in your life. As difficult as things are, as challenging as things are, there's always something to be grateful for. And then just on the bottom right, there's a few Indigenous specific sort of suggestions. Like there are lots of really interesting podcasts, if that's something you're interested in, lots of Indigenous authors or recipes as an example. Now, self-care. We've already talked about taking a break or saying no. Someone on the left, someone posted this meme on my Facebook I guess it was within the last week. Again, my memory fails me. I'm pretty sure it was in the past week. But it was like that feeling that, we have to kind of do everything. We have to be everything to all people. But being able to say no sometimes is better for us. And self-care can be in a whole range of things. It can be physical, like getting exercise, emotional. It can be social. It can be spiritual. So for us as First Nations people, participating in ceremony or different cultural activities. We had a in-person retreat of our executive leadership team. I think it was 3 weeks ago now, and I had a brushing, and that was really helpful. Personal things, what's a hobby for us, for me, may not be a hobby for you. Space is another, being able to organize your space, financial, and work. We'll talk about work just in a second. But for example, personal, like some people that I have a lot of FNHA Facebook friends actually, which there's pros and cons to that because if you're going to post something in your personal life and then your work mates see it. But there's a nurse who works in the chief nursing office, this great, beautiful First Nations lady named Leona Smith. And one of the things she did over the pandemic was she actually learned to bead. And now she's making these incredible earrings. I'm actually wearing her earrings today. It's hard to see, but that's good for her. I don't know if I could bead actually. I'm not very dexterous, but for me, one of the things I like to do before bed is I read a book, and I've done it ever since I was a little kid. It's probably why I have to wear glasses, because I always had a book right up to my face. in the dark with a flashlight because my mom used to want me to go to sleep and I just wanted to read. I read for pleasure. I don't read medical journals. I don't read FNHDA policy documents. I don't read frameworks. I read nothing like that while I'm in bed. I spend about half an hour till I feel sleepy, and then I put the book down, light off, and I usually am able to fall asleep. That's one thing I do for myself. When I went to medical school, I had a mentor advisor, and at the very beginning of medical school, he said to me, what do you love to do? I said, I love to read right before bed. He said, then never give that up. And if you do it all the way through medical school, it will become a lifelong habit. And that is true. I never pulled an all-nighter in medical school. I always stopped. It might have been very late into the night, but I took that half hour for myself. So for each of you listening here today, there's something that you can do, right? There's some activity that you love that might be worth refining or reacquainting yourself with it. And like I said, you don't have to do it for a whole day. You can do it for even half an hour and build that into your day as a way of starting to heal yourself from this journey that we've been on. Workplace strategies for mental health and wellness. These are some things for teams, I think, to think about. And we've tried to do some thinking around this in the OCMO. The meme, I have a girlfriend that lives in Kelowna, actually, and she and I usually send a meme back and forth to each other every day to encourage each other. Usually they involve Baby Yoda. But this one was one that was kind of not funny, not funny. It takes courage to say yes to rest and play in a culture where exhaustion is seen as a status symbol. That one's really important to think about, because I know, for example, for myself, I had the last 16 months been working crazy hours, 10, 12, 14 hours at my desk. A couple of people, we would, if we had an end of day touch base around the pandemic, for example, we started getting into this habit of glorifying how few steps we took a day. So someone would be like, oh, I only got 800 steps. Oh, well, I only got 600 steps. It's like, okay, there's something a little messed up about that, right? When we're not moving. I'm not saying you have to get 10,000 steps a day, but when we start glorifying how sedentary we've been during a workday, that's a bit of a problem. So I went away for 3 weeks at the end of May, early June. I went on vacation and I went camping with my family, like I said. The first couple of days doing hikes, I had trouble walking. Like, I was out of breath. I was like, jeepers, like, I'm usually a good hiker, like, and it's because I'd been so sedentary. So over that period of time while I was on vacation, we started walking quite a bit, like 5K. We did an 11K hike with our dog. And I got home mid-June and I said, you know what, that's it for me. I'm going to walk, at least 4 or 5 times a week. I have to keep this up for my health. Like, I have to do this. And so I've tried to rearrange my schedule that at the end of the day, I can go out for a walk and I can take the last meeting, sometimes that goes until 4:30, on my phone. And I get a little bit of, hassle from people going, oh, that must be nice that you're outside. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I went outside and I'm walking, but I'm still at this meeting and I'm ready to contribute. That's the only way I can fit it in. That's the only way I can fit this in with this life I'm living right now. So some of the things we've tried to do in the OCMO, Office of the Chief Medical Officer, is stop the leaving one Zoom meeting and clicking on the next Zoom link right away. 25-minute meetings for half-hour meetings, or 50-minute meetings for an hour instead of going 60 minutes to 60 minutes. Gives you that 10-minute break to get up, walk around, go to the bathroom, let's be frank, get another coffee, whatever. It gives you that little break. Putting things like on your auto reply, my working hours and your working hours may be different. Please do not feel you need to reply outside of your normal working hours. Like, don't report me to Richard Jock, but he's like one of the worst, right? He'll send a text message at 6 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. I don't know when he sleeps, but, and I'll read them if have my phone around me or if I'm on call, but like, I will send an email. Sometimes Saturday mornings really early, I get up and I do emails, but I always start them with, I hope you're not reading this till Monday morning. So making small changes, not just for yourself, but for your work colleagues. Separating work when you work from home, that one's a biggie too. Like, I work in my apartment. You could see the paintings that I have behind me. Literally, my living room is 6 steps away, not even 4 steps away. This is my little space. And once I leave it for the day, I don't spend any more time here. And I try not to look at it. I let my screens go off during the night. So I'm not watching all these emails come in. Energizing health breaks. We've talked about that. Unplugging from work when you can. Doing walking meetings. I've done a few of those with my smaller team that work on cultural safety and humility. And taking those annual leave, personal and sick days. I had accrued quite a bit of annual leave that I didn't take last year, and HR let me carry it over. But I can't get myself in that same situation again where I'm working 10 months in a row without a break. I'm sure you can't either. Getting to the end. So there's all kinds of resources, of course, around FNHDA and our wildfire response, some of the supports and resources on the links. I mentioned the virtual doctor of the day, the virtual substance use psychiatry program. Some of you may not be aware of the Good Medicine Initiative that I think has been kind of dormant over the last little while, but during the pandemic, we were asking communities and individuals to submit stories of how they were getting through things in a good way. That's why we called it Good Medicine, excuse me, and celebrating that kind of resilience and creativity of ways people are finding to take care of themselves. And as the picture that we had during COVID was, it's important to stay connected to our cultures, our communities, to each other. I just put this slide in at the very end because I'm not going to talk about children's mental health and wellness, but that's there for you in the PDF. If you have kids and you're worried, there's a whole bunch of resources, a whole bunch of other resources that you can click on. The Canadian or the BC division of the Canadian Mental Health Association also has lots of resources, as well as some of the links that I've put in on my slides. And lastly, this one, I can't remember where I found this quote, but it says, when you can't control what's happening, challenge yourself to control the way you respond to what's happening. That's where your power is. So even though we're living and working in situations that feel very much out of control, one of the ways we can help ourselves is by controlling how we are reacting, responding, and how we're managing it. You know, I keep using examples from my own daily life, but you know, Monday to Friday, my work week is pretty bad, right? Like, I get up super early, I walk the dog, then I start working. But now I'm trying to incorporate little breaks during the day. And I'm trying to get that walk in at the end of the day. I'm actually going for a walk after this webinar. And the other thing I've done is I've paired up with a colleague in our office. So it's like having that accountability to each other. She texted me this morning. She goes, "Are we still on for this afternoon?" And I'm like, I could use that excuse. Like, I'm just giving a presentation, but I'm accountable to her. So it's like, we're going to head out despite the fact that I kind of don't feel like it today. And then I'm going to have dinner. Then I might have an hour to myself. then I'm going to go to bed. Like that's what my work week looks like. But I'm trying the exercise and the taking small breaks. Those are the two things that I'm working on right now. I'm not on a diet. I'm not meditating. I'm not doing a million things. And I would encourage, like I said, each and every one of you to pick one or two things, and kind of hold steady to that if you can, even as busy as we are now. And last but not least, I know I've gone on for quite a while, is I thought I would leave you a picture of my Barky dog, because he's got a happy face, and you're going to get a little burst of oxytocin just looking at this picture. His real name is Sawyer, but I currently am calling him Mr. Barky McBarkface because he's been in a real barky period the last couple of weeks, driving me crazy. But anyway, I'm happy to take questions. I will stop sharing my screen. I see the chat, but for some reason, while I've been sharing my screen, that only came up now. Super sorry. I'll stop sharing and then I'll see what kinds of questions there were in the chat. Next. Darlene has a question.
Hi, thank you for that present. Let me find my mic. There we go. Thank you for that presentation. There we go. I'm just wondering, you were talking about setting healthy boundaries and like when you're home and, the reading the lights and what have you. I do go on call, and so that's really hard as a health director to do. I think that's where I'm starting. I know that's where I'm feeling the overwhelmed. And I feel like that now what? Now what could happen? Like the pandemic, I was up here, then the forest fires started creeping up, and I'm still here because with our cultural protocol, there's still unfinished business up here with the deaths we've suffered from COVID. So that's where I'm at. I'm just like,
yeah. So I think one of the things, for example, I forgot to mention it, so thank you for bringing this up, is, oh, there's Barky Sawyer, you'll hear him in the background, is that anxiety state, that stress state. What happens is we get really like our muscle tension, and it causes that shortness of breath feeling, like, and we don't take very deep breaths. If you actually pay attention to how you're breathing for like 30 seconds or a minute, you will see that many of us who live with chronic stress have that really short breath. So one thing that can be helpful, even though it's hard, like I get the part about being on call, although I'm sure you have it much harder than I do. We do call for a week at a time. So I just started this morning and I'll be on call until next Tuesday morning. Which I kind of dread, but it's what it is. So not being able to separate during this week, one thing that's really important is to learn even breathing exercises that work well for you. One really quick one that you can even do between meetings, and it takes practice, is just 10, do 10. Just inhale really slowly through your nose and out through your mouth. If you do that 10 times, that can really help. I used to be terrified of public speaking, believe it or not. And before, this was years and years ago, but when I got up on the stage, my voice would waver. I would sound all shaky. That would make me even more nervous. So before I went up, I would take that minute as they were reading the introduction or whatever, and just like in through my nose and out through my mouth 10 times. And that can start it's like stretching a muscle. Soon, if you do that for a couple of weeks, even a couple times a day, you'll notice you'll be able to breathe a little deeper, because all we do really is that we're breathing really shallow. And getting up and walking around even for a couple of minutes in between calls can help that breathing. The other one that people use a lot, and when I was with Nola and George Jeffrey at the ELT meeting, is that what they call box breathing. So you breathe in for 5 or 6 seconds, then you hold it for a couple of seconds, then you breathe out for a couple of seconds, then you hold for a couple of seconds. So picture going around in a square. You breathe in and hold, breathe out and hold. That's another one. If you Google box breathing, you'll get a technique. The other thing I did, and this is just being completely honest, is I downloaded at the beginning, I downloaded that Calm app thinking, oh, there's these meditations and I've gone on it twice. I probably could add that in once I'm more solid in my walking and taking breaks. But like, one of the things I think I encourage people to do is be just real, right? And again, it's like that New Year's Eve syndrome. Like, we're all gonna be better people into the new year, and inevitably, like, honestly, like I say every New Year's Eve, I'm gonna be a nicer person, and literally by lunchtime on New Year's Day, I've already been cranky with someone, right? So it's like try to be and that's the other thing, is that be kind to yourself, right? We are not really kind to ourselves when we're working as hard as we're doing. We're like, oh man, I should have done that before I stopped for the day. Or even I'll go out walking, I'll be like, oh crap, I forgot to answer that person's email. You know what? Half the time, that person's not sitting there all evening going, geez, why didn't Charlene respond to my email? Like, you'll get to it in the morning. It's it's really sort of being realistic. And being compassionate with ourselves. We're doing the best we can. We have very demanding jobs, but we have to make sure that we get through this ourselves, and that our health hasn't suffered more than it already has already. So that's kind of my parting message.
So I'm not sure if there are any other participants that have some questions. Now's your opportunity.
Hi, it's Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. It's amazing. And I think a few weeks ago, I was at a burnout stage, and like everything was just one after another. And like you mentioned, the fires, the evacuations, and in our area, we had flooding, we had deaths in our community one after another, and Indian residential school findings. And, I was at a breaking point, and all I could do was cry. I couldn't function. I couldn't email. I couldn't Zoom. I couldn't phone. I couldn't work. I was just so much at an angry state at the beginning of June, and it's like all I could do is cry. I couldn't even be the leader as a health director at most of my meetings, and I was like, I'm going to reschedule. I get to my meetings, and all I did was cry, and I was like, thank you, see you, let's reschedule.
Yeah. Well, I think, part of what you're talking about is, we need to be authentic, as like you were feeling what you were feeling at the time, right? And I think if we are able to, especially work on teams where we can be our authentic selves and just say, you know what, today is like it's not happening for me. It's not a good day. I need to take care of myself. My experience so far has been people have been pretty understanding, although like I said, it sometimes can be tough. But I always explain it to people. It's like that, if you've been on an airplane and you get the safety briefing at the beginning, And, you know, they always say, you know, if you're traveling with a child and the oxygen mask drop down, you put one on yourself first before you put it on the child. And it's not intuitive, right? Our nature would be, oh my God, I got to save my child. And it's the same thing. We have to save ourselves, because we're not going to be any good to anybody else if we're not at least keeping, you know, that bed above water. I'm not saying that's an ideal situation, but we have a lot to contend with right now. And certainly it sounds like you're dealing with a lot. So that self-preservation, we have to look after ourselves first. But, you know, giving this talk, you know, again, I'm trying to be super realistic and say, this talk was not meant to like inspire you to start a whole brand new life. You know, I'm not Oprah. I'm just saying, pick a couple of things and it can make a difference. Like since I started my walking and I've been keeping it up, like I said, I've had a couple people like knitter natter, do a little bit complaining that, oh, like I'm outside instead of being at my desk. You know what? It's making me be more efficient. And I'm also getting what I need so that I'm not crying at meetings necessarily, although I may as well. That's the compassion piece. But you've got to save, we have to save ourselves first before we can help communities and the people we work with, because otherwise we'll be off on a leave. Like that's literally the reality for people, right? And the other thing is, if you really need to go off on a medical leave, like then you should, right? Like there's no use hanging on if you need that time. We've had a couple people take leaves and they've come back better. You know, I don't like that phrase, work smarter, not harder, because that implies that we're not being smart about the way that we're working now. Like most of us are brilliant, if you ask me. But it's just making yourself be a little bit more efficient by sticking to those few wellness pieces that you're picking up and then being able to be consistent with them. That's being a little bit more efficient. But we're still working super long hours, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm at my computer really early in the morning. So, and it's just what we need to do to get through this. I really hope that things get better soon.
I worked the whole 16 months and, you know, I took maybe a day here and a day there. And, you know, I was like, I even worked through the Christmas holidays and New Year's and finally I told myself, you know what, I need to book some vacation. I just came back from a 12-day vacation and I feel amazing now. And like I'm back to work for 2 weeks and then I'm on vacation for another 2 weeks. So
That's great.
Pretty proud of myself for booking that time.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing, right? Like I don't mean it in an arrogant way at all. And I'm sure for health directors, it's even more like you feel like you're indispensable or that you need to be there, right? Which probably in reality you do. But to be able to take that break away, you need coverage. So if you can get that coverage, then like I said, you know, same with myself, I carried over so many weeks of vacation from last year, and I was determined not to do that this year because it's just not doable. The months go by without a break, and yeah, it's really tough. Like Shannon, our chief medical officer, she's heading off as of Friday on 3 weeks vacation. She won't be back till September 7th. So I know my life's going to be kind of miserable for 3 weeks, but you know, then she'll be back for a week and then I'm going to go on annual leave again. So it's just, you know, we're supporting each other getting through this. If you can find the coverage, I would certainly encourage everybody to take the breaks that they're entitled to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Charlene here. Before our time runs out, I'd like to acknowledge the time that the health directors have taken out of their day to participate in this amazing opportunity. Vacation time did me wonders. I traveled 4,000 kilometers within 6 days, but I was a total tourist, and coming back made it easier. Every year, the winter break, I go on call, so I understand about the burnout, but I'm also recognizing the supports I get from FNHA, FNHDA, and I promote it to anybody that will listen. FNHA gave us health directors opportunity to connect with a counselor, a mental health clinician, within the storm of COVID. And I took them up on that offer. And what really pushed me to take them up on that offer was I only have 2 daughters. And my youngest one says, "Mom, you're so angry, I don't even want to ride in a car with you."
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that in myself. So I've searched and searched through my emails, and I found the email and the number to call the counselor. So I did let my family know there are days where I'm working late. That's when I'm phoning my counselor. I need to separate my life, my work, and give myself this opportunity to connect with a counselor, because it helped me peel that onion, so to speak, that one, I wasn't brought in this world to walk on eggshells. 2, there's nothing in this world that could have prepared us for a world pandemic. And I do encourage the health directors to reach out for that support. And just to recap what I've heard, what stuck out for me the most was the New Year's resolutions. So I flipped the New Year resolutions. I need to model it for our daughters. What a New Year's resolution is what do I want to achieve this year, rather than give up.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I did a flip on that. So I said, I'm going to give myself 6 months, and I'm going to go 1 month without bread. That includes fry bread. You know how hard that is. But I'm doing it. So this is my first month without any of the bread. So I just wanted to share that little piece with you, and give any other health directors opportunity to ask any questions or their input at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I don't see any more questions in the chat now. I've seen some comments, and there was one person who wanted to know if they could share your PowerPoint when we send it to them.
Yep.
I appreciate the honesty of them. So yes, Nell says yes, everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just tried to gather as much information that's available, even publicly, so that people have it in one spot. But there's some really good links, both in the slides and at the end. So yeah, you're welcome to it. That's not my information to keep to myself.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I don't see any more questions. Last call for questions, everybody. We do appreciate, we know that some offices close around between 4 and 4:30. So I do note that we have lost a couple of people, but people were able to be here for all of it. We'll send out the PowerPoint, and we have been recording. So if y'all feel like you need a refresher, you can listen again. I'm actually just going to stop recording right now.